Well, I'm back one more time, and I hadn't really planned on doing another video about the X-T2 so soon, but I just wanted to go over a few more things. And since I'm basically bored to death because I've been on vacation for a little while here, with using up the rest of my vacation for work, and it's like 10 degrees outside and a little bit breezy, so it's not much of anything I can do outside right now. So just a few more things about the X-T2. I've got a little list here I just wanted to talk about. As far as the image quality goes, you know, Fuji, ever since I had the X Pro 1, the X-T1, also had the X100, X100S, these cameras are just really easy to get a nice photo out of, whether you're using the in-camera JPEG settings or you're shooting RAW and using something like Adobe Lightroom, and you know, using the RAW files and setting one of the profiles, the camera profiles like Provia, Astia, Acros, or anything like that, in the camera calibration section down in Adobe Lightroom. That gets you really close to what it looks like in the camera for the JPEGs, but you know, even using the RAW, it works out really well as far as the colors go and just the look and feel of the pictures. Adobe, again, is not known to have the best RAW conversion for the X-Trans files. If you want the best for that, probably Capture 1, 11, or 10 would do much better. And I've actually compared the Adobe output from Lightroom, the latest version of Lightroom, and the Capture 1. And the Capture 1 just clearly has more detail, you know, fine detail, if you've researched anything about the X-Trans files. And Adobe Lightroom, and then you're already familiar with, you know, the smearing or the watercolor effect or whatever in certain details, like in distant tree branches, shrubs, foliage, grass, things like that. Things you probably never see unless you zoomed in to Pixel Peep anyway. But Capture 1 does have better output for that. But anyway, just the general image quality and so on, it's just great. I mean, if you want something very simple and easy, even if you buy the lower level cameras like the XA3, the XE2, whatever, the XE3 that's out now, you can still get really quick and easy pictures out of those. And actually, that's what I would recommend for somebody that, you know, wants a really good quality camera, but they don't want to fool around with, you know, a lot of post-processing and so on. If you just want something quick and easy, just, you know, get one of the, you could get like a XA3, which is the latest XA series. It's kind of the lower level camera that Fuji has, more of an entry level camera, but still really nice. And the XE2S, which is still, you can get that new. So the XA3, it does not have the X-Trans sensor. It has just a regular bare pattern, you know, traditional sensor that's, you wouldn't have no issues with Lightroom, but somebody like that probably wouldn't be doing post-processing anyway. So somebody that wants a nice, quick and easy camera that comes with a 16 to 50 lens, which is like a 24 to 75 millimeter, so it's like a wide to, you know, very mild telephoto. So that'd be a good travel lens, you know, for people, families, anybody that wants a nice camera like that. It's got the flippy screen that actually flips up, and instead of just like, you know, the X-T2 where it just kind of flips out like that, or down, the XA3 would actually flip out and then flip up, so you can, you know, see yourself if you're doing some kind of a selfie or, you know, doing a group photo on a tripod. You can kind of see what the framing is, but it does not have a viewfinder, so that's kind of a bad thing about the XE3. The type of customer to buy one of those maybe wouldn't care anyway. So and it's a 24 megapixel sensor, so that's fine, get plenty of resolution. It does have a touchscreen on the XA3, and it's contrast detect autofocus only, whereas something like the XE2, XE3, X-T2, X-T1, you know, they have like a hybrid contrast plus phase detect. But yeah, I mean, something like the XA3, or even if you want something a little bit higher, like, okay, the XA3 actually, as far as the cost goes, that's only like $550 right now with the lens. And again, that lens is the it's not the XF series lenses. It's a little bit lower quality lens, but, you know, any of the Fuji lenses I've seen or used, I haven't really found any bad Fuji lenses. I mean, there's some that are obviously lesser optically, you know, as far as optical quality goes, but I've never seen any that's you know, that I would consider bad or, you know, wouldn't really want to use it. So that's with the 16 to 50, and then the X-T2 would come something like the more traditional kit lens, like the 1855 XF lens, which is f2.8 to f4 variable aperture lens, and that's running the X-T2S. That would be about $700 right now. So that's got the 16 megapixel X-Trans sensor with the flippy screen, but it doesn't flip all the way up like the X-A3 would, and has the hybrid contrast and phase detect autofocus. So I mean, if you knew someone, or if you're actually looking for something for yourself, the X-A3, if it had a viewfinder, that would be so much better. Even if it didn't have a really great quality viewfinder, that's really the only downside I can see about that X-A3. If you're talking about somebody that just wants a really nice camera that make great images really easily, it would just be nice if it had a viewfinder, because a bright sunny day on vacation or whatever out somewhere, maybe a little more difficult to see the screen, but probably not that big of a deal. And again, maybe some people that are in that market anyway, they probably wouldn't expect a viewfinder and wouldn't necessarily care anyway. So back to the X-T2, if you're thinking, well, if I've got the X-T2 and it's so great, then why would I buy something like the A7R III, which I'm recording on now? So the A7R III, just kind of rambling and going all over the place here, but just bear with me for a minute. The A7R III, it just had enough improvements that I kind of wanted to jump in at this point. I hadn't really had any full frame Sony cameras. I had the Sony the A6000. I didn't really like it, because I didn't like the form factor of the body. It had a pretty slow startup time even after the new firmware updates and everything. It was a great sensor, it was a great camera overall, very capable, but I just didn't really like the look and feel of it, how it felt, and it just wasn't for me, so I ended up selling it and didn't really use it much. But it is a great, if you're in that market and the price range for it, it is a really good bargain right now. You can still get it new, and it is a great camera, but I just, for me, it wasn't really something I wanted. And so X-T2 versus the Sony a7R III. The A7R III, I kind of want to get back into the full frame again, and I had the Nikon D750 in the past, D700, D600. I never really had a full frame mirrorless camera. I've had a few of the Sony or Fuji X series aps-c size sensor cameras, and those have always been great. But I've always liked the full frame, and so this was the first full frame mirrorless that I really wanted to get into, and felt like I could keep it for a few years, because I kind of honestly kind of sick of switching around cameras, always trying to find the one that would really make me content to keep it for several years, like I did the D700. The D700 was really the last camera that I felt content to keep for a little over 3 years, and didn't really feel like I needed to upgrade, because it was just a great camera. And at that time there wasn't all these mirrorless cameras out anyway, so you didn't really feel compelled to upgrade. There wasn't something coming out every other week. So just be careful with that temptation to, you always got to have something new or whatever. You don't necessarily need something new. Let's face it, something like the original X100, if you could deal with the slow autofocus on it, that's still a really great camera. Things like the D700, there's still a lot of great cameras, and a lot of people just sharing online anyway. If you're not printing really big pictures, it doesn't matter, but whether it's 12 megapixel, 16 megapixel, that's way more than enough. But I've kind of always wanted the full frame, and the autofocus on the A7R III is great. Great easy video. The eye autofocus, you've probably seen videos about that. It is pretty amazing. So I figured, get the A7R III with a couple lenses, probably buy like something like the Rokinon, or Rokinon, however you pronounce that. Samyang's kind of the same thing, I think just different name, the 35mm f2.8. I'll probably buy that because it's autofocus, and some people have been whining about the autofocus on it, but I've seen some of the videos on it, and it looks fine to me, because I'm not shooting sports, I'm not shooting anything really fast action. I hardly ever use continuous autofocus anyway, other than video. So something like that would probably be great for me, because I just want a 35mm lens for the A7. And not something that's just ridiculously expensive. So probably get a, that, keep the 24 to 240. I debated whether I get the new 24 to 105 for the A7R III. Again, I know I'm talking about the Sony, but it kind of all goes together here why I have the X-T2 and the A7R III. But maybe just a couple lenses for the A7R III, and that would probably be all I really need as far as lenses for that. And try to avoid getting into the trap of like, oh, I got to have this prime, got to have that prime, because I don't really switch lenses that much, and I'm not going to take a prime on vacation, which is where the vast majority of my pictures come from. So I know you got the lens wars, the lens snobs out there that you got to have the best of this, got to have $2,000 pro zoom, 24 to 70 or whatever it might be, the G Masters. I don't need all that. As of right now, December 31st, all the pictures in my A7R III gallery are made with a 24 to 240. And you can judge for yourself about the quality on that. And, like I said, nobody's going to be zooming in and look at those pictures 100% pixel peeping anyway. So it's a fine lens, it's an extremely versatile lens. I mean, that's definitely going to be the only lens I take on vacation. I mean, I'm not going to haul around a bunch of other lenses and just make myself miserable and, worry about switching lenses, because I'll be damned if I'm going to be switching lenses. I'm just not going to do it. Pretty much every picture that I made on those vacation galleries, you can see they're all zoom lenses, even something like the cheap Tamron 28 to 300. They do just fine, and look at all the pictures that people had from way back in the day, the old cameras, when zoom lenses were not really as good a quality as they are now. So something like the 24 to 240 is still way more than, a lot better than some of the other older lenses from the past. And like I said, it's just plenty good enough quality. So that's A7R III, just kind of because I wanted to get into the full frame again and feel like I could keep it for several years and just not feel like I constantly need to upgrade. Because it's just a beast of a camera. It's got way more resolution than I ever need. But you can use the compressed RAW and you get down to like a 42 megapixel file, the actual file size. And that's reasonable and fine for me. I'd rather it be smaller, but it means a 42 megapixel sensor. So there's that. I'd go into the Fuji things again. I already talked about the lenses. Like this is the 18 to 135, which is a 27 to 202 equivalent. And again, this is another lens, that really the only thing I would need on vacation. And it is a zoom lens, obviously, and it's a variable aperture lens, and it's, from what I've seen, the image quality or the optical quality, I'm very happy with it. Excuse me, it's not obviously as good as the 16 to 55 or the 50 to 140 2.8, the professional zoom lenses or the primes, but again, with the Fujis especially, I've never really seen any bad lenses. This is weather sealed and everything, so with the X-T2, the battery grip and that lens, it's all weather sealed, and I'm not going to sit out in the pouring rain anyway. So if it's got just a little bit of weather sealing, that's fine for me, because I always protect my gear if it starts raining. I'm not going to just leave it out in the rain because I'm not out shooting for a living. It's just a hobby, and I don't want to take a chance of ruining something. It just doesn't make any sense for me. But this whole setup right here with the X-T2, the battery grip, the official Fuji battery grip with 3 batteries, 2 in the grip, 1 in the body, and this lens that weighs right about 3 pounds 2 ounces, which is almost exactly what the A7R III weighs with the 24 to 240 lens on it, and the body, without the grip. So the A7R III with 24 to 240, that weighs right around 3 pounds 2 ounces, kind of basically the same weight as the Fuji. Without the grip on the Fuji, it actually gets quite a bit lighter. I mean, at least it feels that way, even with the 18 to 135. It's not a very heavy lens at all. Some other things I like about the X-T2, just Fuji in general, the menu system. Just really simple menus. That they've kind of cleaned them up even more in the X-T2, and there's the firmware updates that they do. Just great, like the font and just how it's organized. Everything's really well. And the other thing I like about it, you noticed, it goes into the My Menu option when I turn it on, which I wish is what Sony would do. Sony's, when you turn it back on, it'll go into that personalized menu if that's where you left it the last time. But so far I haven't seen any option like you have in the Fuji's, where when you go into the menu, you can have it automatically go to the personalized menu, which is great. I mean, everything from the font and everything, it just, maybe that's being a little too anal or, nitpicky, but just really great font and everything. It just looks very clean, professional. As far as the, even the, it's in the EVF, I can't show you that right now, but in the EVF, it's very well organized also, great font, and you can downsize the display on the EVF so that you have like a black area around the image, and then that's where all your settings information would appear, because it's a large viewfinder anyway. And me wearing glasses, my eye is not right up to the viewfinder. It helps to have it kind of zoomed out a little bit, so the image is actually a little bit smaller in there, and then that leaves that black space around it so that you have all your menus, the settings information in there. So I really like that. And and just the fact that when you turn it vertically or portrait orientation, that all the information on the viewfinder changes, and also on the LCD, I guess you can see that when you change it to portrait orientation, all the settings information changes with it. It kind of orientates to where you can read it. It's all still readable. What else do we have here? Yeah, the one thing, just something real quick, I don't know if I mentioned this in this other video I had about the X-T2, but the front command dial and the rear command dial, first of all, you can press those in so they're not just, left and right scrolling, but you can press in for options like to, press in on the back to zoom in 100% on the image just to review it, or to check focus. But one thing I would say, as far as I wish, as far as improvement goes, I wish those had like a rubberized coating on them, like the, I might have mentioned this in another video, but on the Nikon cameras, Nikon DSLRs, and I think the GH5 I had was like that too. These, I don't know about the GH5, but definitely on the Nikon DSLRs, the front and rear command dials, the little knobs or nibs, whatever you want to call them, those little slots on them, first of all, they're bigger. But the most important thing is they're kind of rubberized. So if you've got really dry fingers in wintertime like I do, and if it's like 30 degrees or whatever, or lower outside, and you're trying to spin that dial, sometimes it's almost impossible because your skin is so dry and it just doesn't want to turn it, and you end up actually accidentally pressing it in, which causes other things to happen. Yeah, other than that, I really can't think of many complaints that I have about the X-T2. One other thing, let me see if you can hear this. That's the beautiful shutter sound of the X-T2. Maybe it's kind of trivial, but the sound of the shutter on the X-T2 is just wonderful. It just makes you want to go out and take a picture, like maybe take a picture of your shoes or whatever. It's just a great shutter sound. Compared to the A7R3, the A7R3 is pretty loud. It's a lot better if you use the electronic first curtain shutter on the A7R3, because then you don't have any sound. On the front end, just as the exposure's ending, you just hear that little, just kind of a half of the shutter sound basically. So, so instead of the you get like a chunk on the A7R3. So it does make it quite a bit quieter on the A7R3 if you enable electronic first curtain shutter, but there are some issues with that. You can read about that in the owner's manual if you have one. And there are some issues with people posted some pictures comparison about the how the bokeh looks, the autofocus area on the images on the A7R3 when you have the electronic first curtain shutter enabled, and any other Sony camera, I guess, where you enable that. Just some things to keep in mind. I don't think it'd be a big issue, but there are certain downsides to using electronic first curtain shutter. So, and then I've also had people say that they had problems with an external flash or third-party flash firing correctly. Sometimes it wouldn't fire. and they were using electronic first curtain shutter. They switched over to fully mechanical shutter, and all those problems cleared up. So just something to keep in mind about that. I don't really know much of anything else to say about just my whole situation with the A7R III and the X-T2, other than I would say that also, you know, some people say, well, why don't you just have two of the same cameras if you want to have two cameras, you know, one for a backup, and that way if you have a problem with one body, then you know you've got another body and same lenses fit and everything else. But I'm just doing this for a hobby, and you know, I just like to have something a little bit different. You know, maybe get bored of using one or the other, and I'll just go pick up the other one. So, you know, if you're in a position where you can afford something like that, I mean, for me, I like to have something a little bit different. So, you know, I love the X-T2 and just the way Fuji's whole philosophy of how they do cameras, how they design and build the cameras, you know, how they do their firmware updates. Sony's pretty good about firmware updates too, but maybe not as good as Fuji. As far as adding new features and functions and actually fixing things that people complain about. You know, for example, on the Sony, let's wait and see if they fix the almost invisible focus point. So like you're in AFS, single focus point, what do they call it, the focus area. So I use like the single flexible spot, I guess is what they call it. But that little focus point, you can almost it's almost invisible. You can barely see it. So I don't know why they don't make it like sort of like an orange color, and then when you get focus confirmation, focus lock, it's green, which is fine. You know, very easy to see. But until then, it's kind of like a really light gray color. It just kind of disappears. So I'm hoping they fix that in the next firmware update. I've already seen a lot of people complaining about it, and it is to me kind of a big problem because you're constantly losing track of where the focus point is. And then on the A7R III, you'd have to go into the focus joystick, kind of hit it in the center and like put it back in the middle. That way you kind of know where it is. Okay, I'll reset it, and then now I know where it is. It's in the center, and I can find it again and move it around where I want it. I think that's about it, really. You know, I do love having these dual cards right on the side here. Very easy to get to. And again, on this battery of it, it's just really nice that you can power it with the AC adapter that they include, and then you just pull it out and you've got your two batteries. I'm not using the official Fuji batteries that are has the S version after it. These are just the B&H batteries, you know, the Watson batteries they sell. Because I don't shoot 4K video for hardly any length of time, and you know, I think I've got it actually set to 1080. Because I just don't think I'll really be using 4K right now, and I'm not doing a bunch of continuous shooting for still photography. So the thing is about those batteries, those were kind of designed to deal with the heat more, and so there is the original in the body, so I'll keep the original in the body of the Fuji battery. You know, just use these third-party batteries in the grip, and you know, that's fine. And I've never had any trouble with them. The Watson batteries that I've used in the past, or the Wasabi batteries. In general, if you could have no issues buying the batteries, I usually buy them when they're like $50 a piece. But those batteries for the X-T2, the official ones that you're supposed to use in the X-T2, they're $80 a piece, and I haven't seen any discounts on them. You know, it's just, to me, it's a little bit ridiculous. You know, getting close to $100 for one battery. And so if you want to have three batteries, I mean, like $160 just to put two batteries in the grip, and you know, the one you've already got. So that's maybe a little complaint that I would have about the batteries, but the batteries are always kind of ridiculously expensive on these cameras, the proprietary batteries. Whether it's Fuji, Sony's are around $50, $60 or whatever. But I usually do try to buy just one extra official battery. Like on the A7R III, I've got two of the official batteries from Sony, and then the X-T2, since I was going to buy those little battery plates for my Watson multi-charger, just thought I'd go ahead and buy the 2-pack of them anyway. The Watson batteries, actually I think just sold one at a time, but anyway, those are going to work out fine for what I need them for. I think that's really, I think I said that the last time, but I think that's really about it. So All right. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you've got something useful out of this. You know, I know it's kind of rambling and kind of all over the place, but you know, if you watch and you may hear something that you didn't know about, or a little tip or whatever that that might help you. And if that's the case, that's great, because I like to watch videos like this, and you know, there's certain things that I pick up and learn, like, oh yeah, I didn't know how that worked. You know, it's little features and functions about certain cameras that you know, people just start talking about them. They're not necessarily talking specifically about that function to explain it, but as they're talking, you know, you realize that maybe you were using it wrong the whole time, and now when somebody explained it, you know, just kind of in passing, it helped you out. So it helps me out sometimes, so hope that helps you out. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Turn it off with the app on the phone here, which you know, for the A7R3, that's kind of a complaint. Can't change the focus point, Sony, you need to fix that. On the A7R3, the Play Memories app, still photography, whatever, you can't touch anywhere on the screen to change the focus point. I don't know why. You can on some of the older, the A7R2, you know, when you bought the special app that comes, that you can have in the camera, you know, how you had that goofy little menu where you had the apps that you could buy, and you know, or some of them are free that you can download straight to the camera. But with this, the Play Memories app straight from the App Store, using it connected by Wi-Fi to the A7R3, it just baffles me that you can't press on the screen here to adjust your focus. So if you're in a single focus point mode, how are you supposed to do that? You know, you'd have to, I don't know, maybe get somebody to stand where you're going to be standing and get it focused, and then, you know, come back and stand in the same spot. It's just kind of crazy that that they don't have that functionality. So I'm hoping they'll fix that too. All right, I'm going to press the end now. Thank you.